Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2010 werewolf film Nightwolf, which is also known as 13 Hours. And this was just another forgettable, below average horror film. I've seen worse, but I've also seen much better. And this was just another werewolf movie that kind of sucked. I don't know what it is with this genre, but I've seen more bad werewolf movies than I've seen good ones. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, though, I would like to give a special shout out to Steven for requesting yet another review. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal, my Patreon, or my Cash App. The links to all three are in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your requests as soon as I possibly can. Now, Nightwolf is directed by a guy named Jonathan Glendening, and he worked as like a crew member on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Wimbledon, and he was an editor on a few things. Not a lot of stuff though. Like he edited some of his own shorts. He doesn't have, let's just say, the most inspiring or the most incredible filmography. It's very short, and there really isn't a single good movie on it, or a film that most people would even remotely recognize or even remember. I mean, one of his first major products was a segment in a horror anthology I've never heard of called Virtual Terror. Then he did a rom com called Summer Rain, and then he did an action movie called Snub, and then he did this film. And then after this, you want to know what his next masterpiece was? It was Strippers versus Werewolves. And his direction, it's not that good. There's a lot of shots in this where a better director really would have been able to create some actual suspense, some genuine atmosphere. And Jonathan just isn't really able to do that. I don't think he had nearly sharpened his skills enough. Uh, and it really shows here because there's a lot of shots in this where the very low budget is exposed for all to see, and it's not a pretty sight. And then on top of that, there's just a lot of shots that are just in this cramped attic, and they're boring to look at. And honestly, just most of the film is boring to look at visually because it's just in this cramped, tight space. Whether it's a cramped, tight attic, or a cramped farmhouse, or the roof of a mansion. It just so much of this movie is just in tight enclosed spaces, and if you're not a capable director, if you're not somebody who knows how to work around a camera in a creative way, that can be really boring visually. And Nightwolf is one of those films. It's just very boring visually because most of it is just in these very tight spaces. And the werewolf scenes, they're shot with this really ridiculous, stupid looking werewolf vision. And there's a lot of the practical effects that are shot in a way where the lighting isn't right, so then it clearly looks like just a bunch of rubber and latex, and it doesn't look very good. And the times when the practical effects don't look too bad are really when the director is using the right lighting. Otherwise, there are scenes. There's like an entire sequence in the finale where it might as well be shot with fluorescent lights, and it just looks terrible. And there's just a lot of other stuff in this directing wise where it's not as dynamic of a film when it comes to its visuals, and it's a horror film, and you need to have a director who knows how to create something that visually is able to amplify the suspense and the horror. And Glendening doesn't do that. So most of the time, you're just left with not much when it comes to chills or thrills. And it's just a very bland um and dull and not very lively film when it comes to its direction. Could have used some of the same energy that Neil Marshall gave to Dog Soldiers, for instance, which is funny because this film was marketed as being from a producer of Dog Soldiers. As bland and an uninteresting as the direction is for Night Wolf, the script is sadly more of the same. For like the first 20 minutes or so, it's just a bad slasher film. Like it's a setup for a teen slasher, and it's done in a very cliched fashion while it's trying to establish the characters of Sarah and Emily and Doug, um, and Charlie and Steven and Luke and Sarah's stepfather, Duncan, and her mother, Elizabeth. And there's just a lot of just teens hanging out, drinking, teen drama stuff, and nothing that really is at all connected to a werewolf. So for the first 20 minutes in your werewolf movie, there's nothing werewolf about it. So that is kind of a problem, if you ask me. It's a werewolf movie that doesn't even know it's a werewolf movie until like 20 minutes in, when all of a sudden now there's a werewolf. And there is no explanation for this werewolf either. Uh, the werewolf turns out to be Sarah's mom, but there's no explanation for the origin of this werewolf, why her mom is a werewolf, or any of this. I guess it's just that she's always been a werewolf, but they did a pretty bad job in terms of making that feel like it's the case, in terms of having foreshadowing early on or something to make you think that that could potentially be a possibility. Instead, it's just this random werewolf creature that's going around taking out these teenagers. The first one it kills is Gary, who most people will recognize as Draco Malfoy from the Harry Potter films. So the werewolf's first victim is Draco, and he gets killed by the werewolf off screen. And that's another problem with this script, is that so many of the kills just happen off screen, or it's just aftermath stuff. You don't really see the attacks. So it's another problem with this movie, is that it's a werewolf film that doesn't have much of a bite to it, because you don't really see much of the attacks. You just see uh, Draco Malfoy's body all cut up and torn apart, laying on the ground. And you see a lot of really shitty, bad werewolf vision. It's like red and blue filters that makes me think that I'm looking at the film through a virtual boy. And then you have the stuff with the brothers, like Charlie and Steven. Uh, the There's this whole stuff with Steven, who is just an insufferable prick. He is just an absolute douche. An unbelievably huge douche in this movie. And to the point where it feels honestly kind of absurd. And then the younger brother, he's just kind of there. This kid named Luke, who spends most of the movie just sleeping because he took too much pot. Then there's this other brother named Charlie, who winds up ultimately getting killed by the werewolf once again off screen. You have this girl named Emily, who is Sarah's friend, but Sarah and Emily have had a falling out because Sarah moved to Hollywood, to America, and has left her friend behind, and her friend is pissed about that. And at first, you kind of sympathize with her, but then as the film continues on and the story keeps going, it reveals more and more things about her that make her into a selfish twat, like an absolutely awful character that's just about as bad as her boyfriend Steven. But I will give the writer credit for giving her a pretty justified demise, because she winds up taking a shotgun away from her boyfriend, and she's pissed at him because she was left for dead by him, and she's going to shoot him with a shotgun, but then she decides not to, or she's convinced to not do it, but then she decides to take the shotgun away and go find the werewolf herself and shoot it. And then she winds up getting attacked by the werewolf from underneath the floorboards because she's hiding out in the attic with the rest of the uh, group of characters. And she trips and then blows her own head off with a shotgun. And I'm like, okay, I did not see that coming, so I'll give the writer credit for that. I will also give the writer credit for Steven in terms of his comeuppance and him actually having something to do with the mother and her car like crashing, and then her getting in trouble. Well, not just her in trouble, but her car being left behind so the cops can find it later on in the movie. But even that isn't as good of a setup as it could be. Like, I don't know, maybe set it up where that's why she became a wolf, because she got bit by something. She got bit by a werewolf that was hanging around, and then that's why she became the next werewolf. Um, because of the actions of her son, who thought that she was cheating on his dad, with some other guy, and so he wanted to get revenge on her, so he cut up her tires, like something. I just felt like that was underutilized. There's a lot of stuff in this that just feels very underutilized. Like Sarah, she eventually gets, like, actually early on she gets bitten by the wolf, and then she eventually does turn as in the film's like final 5 minutes or so. And when she starts to turn, like, it's actually interesting. It's kind of creepy and tragic in its own way. And she has to wind up killing her own mom, and she actually, in her wolf state, winds up killing this guy named Doug, who she has a crush on. So that I didn't see coming, and that adds an extra layer of tragedy to it. And then before Doug died, though, he shot her up with a tranquilizer, which was left behind by a cop and this animal control guy who's working with this cop. And that was another thing that just felt like it was not utilized properly. Like that whole thing with those guys, they had a good rapport with one another, seemed like they were going to have more to do. They eventually show up at the house and then get killed immediately by the werewolf, once again off screen, because that's just how this film works. Unless it's a werewolf killing another werewolf for some reason. And like, I mean, even the stepfather in Simon McCorkindale, in his last on-screen role, his character gets killed off screen too. Like, you see him briefly in the beginning of the movie, then you see his dead body later on. So you couldn't even have him do a death scene. Uh, I know that might be maybe it might be too soon because it was his last film, so apparently he must have not been in the best of health. But I'm just saying, like, you have him, and then it's just an aftermath shot, like just pretty much everything in this movie, and it's a werewolf slasher film where you don't see the kills. You just see shitty werewolf vision, virtual boy vision, virtual werewolf vision. And then you have the ending, which I kind of don't mind because it goes against convention, where Sarah lives and she wakes up the next day and she still doesn't have hair. Like, when she turned into this wolf creature, she lost all her hair. and she's still bald, which I was like, okay, that's different. And I thought that that was going to set up her going to her mom's bedroom and taking the wig that her mom had in there, which I think was supposed to be a bit of foreshadowing, but it doesn't make any sense until you see the entire movie. Usually, foreshadowing is building up to something that you can kind of piece together before the end of the film, but that's not at all what happened. Instead, it's something that you don't even remotely think about or can't even put together until the very end. Um, and I know some people were like, "Well, isn't that what foreshadowing is?" I'm like, "Yeah, in some ways, yes, but in other ways, no. Like, not all bits of foreshadowing is just for the end. There foreshadowing can be for other elements, other plot threads, other things throughout a story. It doesn't have to just be the ending. So I felt it should have just had more of that throughout the film, little pieces, little hints. But instead you just get that one little thing and then you just think that it's just it's just a random shot of her bedroom. You don't really think that the wig has to do with anything. And then Sarah doesn't even go back to take the wig anyway. So it could have just been nothing in the first place. It might not have even been foreshadowing. And I am just looking more into it than what is actually there. But still, I didn't mind the ending in terms of Sarah surviving and then going off with her friend, not with her friend, with her brother, with her little brother, Luke, and she's gonna go leave and you know try to go somewhere safe. Um, because apparently that's what the mother was doing. She wasn't going to cheat on her husband. She was actually trying to go somewhere safe so she would turn and not hurt anybody. But then Steven screwed that all up. And I'm like, okay, all right. I guess I can kind of see where uh, the story is trying to go here. But it's just so muddled and kind of messy that it doesn't really come together in a way that seems as clear as it should be. And then you have the ending, which is trying to make it seem like Gary is still alive. So I guess all the other people are gonna come back to life too and also turn into werewolves, and I'm kinda like, "Why? Werewolves aren't zombies. If somebody is dead, they're not gonna turn, they're just dead." So, like, are these werewolves also zombies? Are they, wolves? Like, zombies? Like, I don't understand that at all. It's just some lame sequel bait bullshit for a sequel that clearly is never going to happen because this came out in 2010 and there's been no sequel since. So yeah, it's just the script. I think it had potential in some ways. I think the script does a decent job in terms of character development. I actually started to kind of like this cast of characters, even the ones that were dysfunctional, because there were certain things about them that I felt were kind of interesting. And I liked the dynamic between the characters. I felt that there were some fun little bits of banter at points with some of these characters. And for instance, I really did like Sarah, and I wanted her and Doug to make it out and get together and be a couple. Like I actually was rooting for that, and felt that there was some interesting stuff with the mother and her being the werewolf, and some kind of hidden secrets and her father hiding things and just a lot of stuff that I think with a better script really would have been a lot more compelling and interesting than it actually was. And I think if you had actual kills, less of the stupid shitty werewolf vision and actually showing the impact and the bite of these werewolf attacks, that definitely would have helped this movie considerably. because as a werewolf film, it just feels like you're barely getting enough. Like you get like a couple morsels of what you're looking for, and then that's it. And you're just starving for what you consider to be a given when it comes to this genre. The cast, not too bad, actually. I mean, for a low budget, direct to video, independent British horror film, like the performances actually aren't too bad. Isabella Calthorpe as a lead in particular, I thought she did a solid job. Tom Felton played a good, obnoxious, horny teen. It was honestly a lot of fun to see Malfoy play a different kind of jerk off character. Gemma Atkinson was also fine, decent enough as Emily. Uh, I didn't mind Josh Bowman as Doug Walker or Gabriel Thompson, though. I will have to admit, uh, he was all right too, but he was barely even in the movie. But it was Peter Gadiote who played Steven that I was more iffy on. Because he was supposed to be a character who's conniving and cunning, and I didn't really get that vibe from him. He just came across as a jerk off jock more than anything. Antony de Liseo played Luke, the youngest brother. He was so so. Sue Scatting as the mother, like I can't really say much about her because she was barely even in the film. I didn't mind John Lynch as McCrae and Cornelius Clark as May. The cop and the animal control guy. I actually really liked the animal control guy. Sadly, he doesn't really get that much to do, which sucks. And Simon McCorkindale, the from Jaws 3 and Manimal. Um, he was in this and as Duncan Moore, the stepfather, and he was fine for his like brief appearance in the film. The film features some technical aspects, like the cinematography by Jordan Cushing and the editing by Adrian Murray, and they're serviceable. They're not anything that's great, but they're all right. The music by Edward Bradshaw, I didn't really care for that much. Just a lot of loud noises, really, most of the time. Not really anything in terms of a memorable bit of music. It sounded either generic or just loud. And it's like 85 minutes, but it definitely drags because despite some decent character depth and despite some all right performances by the cast and some practical makeup effects that when they're lit properly actually aren't too bad looking and feature a kind of unique design for a werewolf, it's rather boring. It really is. But it's a kind of boring, dull werewolf film that isn't like complete werewolf shit like some of the worst Howling sequels. Uh, but it's still not what I would consider to be a good movie. It's not something that scratches that itch that I'm looking for when it comes to a werewolf film. But anyway, that is my thoughts on Night Wolf. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.